You know, you sit here and you tell me all this where I'm supposed to, like, take this over, but every time I make a decision, you got something to say.
Well, yeah, when you make a stupid decision, yeah.
Rick Harrison kept quiet for nearly 15 years while the lights stayed bright and the money kept flowing. But the silence couldn't last forever. Behind the glass counters and the Vegas neon, something rotten was growing. Employees flashing weapons in heated fights, scandalous photos leaking overnight, a $20,000 lawsuit turning heads, and a wage theft scandal so big it swallowed $40 million and nearly took the shop with it. For the first time, Rick is ready to say it all, calling out the 5 employees who almost destroyed everything, piece by piece. But before we dive into Rick's shocking revelations, you need to understand how the darkness started with one perfect hire who went catastrophically wrong. 1. The Olivia Black scandal. That perfect employee was Olivia Black, and her story reveals the first crack in Rick Harrison's carefully constructed empire. Rick Harrison had built the shop into a machine, humming under the bright Vegas lights, with the promise of quick deals, and even quicker fame. But the truth is, even the best-oiled machines start to rust if they don't get fresh fuel, and behind the glass counters and the scripted laughter, the show needed something real to keep people watching. That's when Olivia Black walked in, not with some grand entrance, but through a Craigslist ad, a gamble that didn't look like much until the cameras started rolling. She wasn't just another employee pulled off a Vegas street. Olivia was hired through a Craigslist ad, a fact that sounds almost like a punchline now. But back then, it was a quiet gamble that paid off fast. Within just 13 episodes, she had built an energy around her that made fans actually care about who was behind the counter. Her chemistry with Chumley felt real, the kind of goofy banter that turned everyday transactions into moments worth watching. Olivia handled deals with confidence, her tattoos standing out under the harsh pawnshop lights, making her feel like a symbol of the new energy Rick wanted for the shop. It was easy to believe that Olivia Black was the perfect hire, and for a brief moment, it looked like she would ride the wave with them for years. The History Channel loved her, the audience loved her, and even the shop seemed to brighten a bit whenever she was in the frame. But like the chocolate river in Willy Wonka that looked sweet under the lights, but turned sour under the heat, the illusion didn't last. On December 15, 2012, the National Enquirer dropped a bomb that would end Olivia's run almost overnight. They exposed her past work with Self-Harm Girls, where she had modeled in photos that the show's production company considered too naughty for Pawn Star's squeaky clean image. And just like that, 2 days later, Olivia was fired, removed quietly but decisively, as if she had never been there. For a show that thrived on chaos and loud deals, the silence around her firing was deafening. It wasn't a hidden skeleton that took decades to uncover. It was a public past, a part of Olivia's story that was out there for anyone to find. But it took one headline to flip everything. The production company had a strict, no explicit content rule for employees, and they enforced it ruthlessly. Olivia, who had become a fan favorite in a few short months, was suddenly labeled a liability, not an asset. She wasn't given a chance to explain, to shape the narrative, or even to say goodbye to viewers who had connected with her. What followed was a legal tangle that exposed the cold reality beneath the pawn shop's bright lights. Olivia filed a lawsuit against the producers, arguing that her termination was discriminatory and that it was unfair to fire her for something unrelated to her work performance. She argued that her photos did not define her ability to work, to negotiate, or to bring value to the show. It was a fight about image, control, and the cost of maintaining a brand that claims to be about real people while cutting them out when the cameras are off. This was the first time Rick Harrison's empire showed just how fragile its reality was. Behind the banter and the laughs, there was a strict rule book, one that could erase an employee's existence in a heartbeat. to protect a reputation that had been carefully polished for years. Olivia's firing set the tone for how Rick and the producers would handle scandals in the future. Zero tolerance, no room for negotiations, and no room for personal stories to complicate the brand. And it leaves a question hanging in the air. Was it justified to fire Olivia for her past modeling work? Or was it a move driven by image anxiety that overstepped into discrimination? But if you think Olivia's scandal was the worst thing that ever hit the pawn shop, wait until you hear about the employee whose violent meltdown turned the shop into a war zone and left Rick Harrison facing his worst nightmare yet. Chapter 2. Daniel's violent meltdown. That nightmare was Daniel Callahan, a 62-year-old disabled Vietnam veteran whose visit to the pawn shop turned into an alleged violent confrontation that would haunt Rick Harrison for years. It was just another day under the humming fluorescence of the gold and silver pawn shop, the kind of day where tourists lined up for a quick photo, while staff hustled to close deals on vintage watches and beat-up guitars. Then the door opened, and in walked Daniel Callahan, a 62-year-old Vietnam veteran carrying a Barrett Model 96B rifle. It was not a dusty revolver or a collectible coin. It was a sniper rifle long enough to catch the eye of every employee in the building, shifting the air from casual to tense in a heartbeat. What unfolded next has two sharply different versions, like a coin spinning in the air under those neon pawn shop lights. On one side, you have Daniel Callahan's version, claiming he was there to sell his rifle and discuss a fair deal when, without warning, he was tackled by security, thrown into a chokehold, dragged across the shop floor, and tossed onto the pavement outside as if he were nothing more than a threat to be removed. He said the incident left him injured, embarrassed, and ready to fight back in court for $20,000 in damages. Flip that coin, and you get Corey Harrison's side of the story. According to him, the pawn shop was packed with around 4,000 customers on that day, and Daniel was not a calm man holding a rifle, but someone going ballistic, demanding to see the owner while raising his voice in a way that left the employees deeply worried about their safety. The image painted by Corey was not of a simple negotiation gone wrong, but of a potential threat that needed to be handled before chaos erupted in a room full of unsuspecting tourists. This moment was a collision of perception and reality, of fear and control, playing out in a shop that had become famous for its carefully managed chaos on camera. But that day, there were no camera crews capturing the scene, only the silent judgment of bystanders watching as a man with a weapon was dragged out of the store. The lawsuit that followed was a reminder of how quickly an ordinary day at the pawn shop could turn into a legal battlefield. Daniel Callahan sued the Pawn Stars team for $20,000, claiming excessive force and assault, while Rick Harrison and his team faced the reality that even the best security plan can be tested in ways you can never predict when you run a business that deals with valuable, dangerous objects daily. It is easy to watch Pawn Stars and think about the shop as a playground for negotiations, where the biggest risk is overpaying for a rare guitar or misjudging the authenticity of a signature. But this incident revealed another layer of reality, a reminder that dealing in high-value and sometimes high-risk items brings real tension to the people behind the counters. When a man walks in carrying a sniper rifle, there is no script to follow, and decisions have to be made in real time under the weight of responsibility for everyone in the store. Behind the scenes, the case likely ended in a quiet settlement, the kind that allows everyone to move on without admitting fault, while letting the show continue without the shadow of a drawn-out legal battle. It is how businesses like this protect themselves while learning the hard way that even a single customer with a single item can change everything in an instant. This incident also highlighted Rick Harrison's approach to dangerous situations and difficult personalities. Rick has always projected a calm, confident presence on the show, but incidents like this reveal the weight of the decisions he has to make when safety and business collide. It showed the world that the pawn shop is not just a set filled with interesting antiques and playful negotiations, but a place where the stakes can suddenly become life or death, even if the cameras never catch it. Whose side do you believe in this he said, she said situation? Do you think Daniel was mistreated? Or do you believe Corey's story that it was a safety crisis that left them no choice? Because if you think physical violence was the only threat to Rick's empire, you might want to stick around. Sometimes the most dangerous enemies come from within, and one trusted insider nearly brought down the entire operation from the inside out. 3. Wayne Jeffries. They say loyalty is priceless, but in Vegas, even loyalty has a paper trail. And for Wayne Jeffries, it ended in a lawsuit that nearly tore open the glittering illusion around Pawn Stars. Before the show became a billion-dollar franchise, before the mugs and t-shirts and busloads of tourists, it was just an idea floating through the stale casino air, waiting for the right person to package it. And Wayne Jeffries swore he was that person. Back in 2007, the Harrisons were just another family with a pawn shop and a dream of breaking into reality TV. They had tried before and failed, hoping to catch the same lightning that made American Chopper and Dog the Bounty Hunter household names. It was Wayne Jeffries, a seasoned Las Vegas promoter who claimed he saw the potential in the gold and silver pawn shop, calling it a hidden gem, ripe for reality TV gold. According to Jeffries, he rolled up his sleeves, opened his contacts, and began a negotiation dance with A&E and the History Channel, pitching the Harrisons and their shop as the real-life Wild West, where rare artifacts and stranger-than-fiction customer stories walked in off the strip daily. And it worked. Within a year, Pawn Stars was not just another reality show. It became the second highest-rated reality series in America, trailing only behind Jersey Shore at its peak. The show turned Rick Harrison from a pawn shop owner into a recognizable face, one that people would point at in airports, the kind that would end up on mugs and Funko Pop figures. Jeffries didn't just pitch the show. He helped craft the brand, shaping the family dynamic, the comedic bits, the antique deep dives, and the negotiations that viewers would replay in their heads every time they walked into a thrift store. He was the behind-the-scenes fixer, the guy in the shadows, making sure the deals on screen felt authentic. He ensured that Rick's quick appraisals and Chumley's goofy distractions translated into something people wanted to watch while eating dinner. And when the money started rolling in, it seemed like the loyalty would last forever. But the machine that Jeffries helped build turned on him with the cold efficiency of a pawn shop scale. The catalyst was a leak, a small piece of information that spiraled out of control. News of Cajun Pawn Stars, a spin-off series, leaked before the network was ready, and the higher-ups at A&E and the History Channel allegedly went into damage control. According to Jeffries, they saw him as the leak, the loose thread threatening to unravel the carefully controlled narrative that kept viewers tuned in and advertisers paying top dollar. Jeffries claimed that network executives pressured Rick and the rest of the Pawn Stars cast to sever ties with him, painting him as the villain, the betrayer, the one who could not be trusted with the empire he helped create. And just like that, Jeffries found himself on the outside, watching the show he claimed to have built continue without him, watching the people he helped turn into stars smile for the cameras while shutting the door in his face. He didn't walk away quietly. In 2012, Jeffries filed a lawsuit not just against the Harrisons, but also against A&E, the History Channel, and multiple network executives. He alleged wrongful termination and breach of contract. claiming that he was promised a continued stake in the series and the brand he helped build, a promise that evaporated the moment he became inconvenient. The lawsuit painted a picture of the entertainment business that felt more pawnshop than Hollywood. Deals made with handshakes, promises whispered in back offices, and alliances that could vanish the moment they threatened the bottom line. It was never about just the show. It was about control, about who held the keys to the pawn shop when the cameras stopped rolling, and who would get the biggest cut when the licensing deals and merchandise checks cleared. For his part, Rick Harrison has largely avoided discussing the details of the lawsuit publicly, maintaining that the business decisions made were necessary to protect the show and its continued success. But for viewers who looked beyond the edited haggling scenes and light-hearted banter, the Jeffries saga revealed cracks in the carefully polished image of the Pawn Stars empire. Was Jeffries the architect of Pawn Stars' success, betrayed when he became too powerful, or was he an opportunist who overplayed his hand in a world where nothing is guaranteed, not even loyalty? That is a question only the people in those meetings can truly answer. But it is a question that reveals the real nature of the empire built under the glare of reality TV cameras. However, individual employee problems were just the tip of the iceberg. While some employees brought chaos behind the scenes, none captured the public's attention like Chumley, whose personal troubles nearly overshadowed his on-screen charm. 4. Chumley's fall from fan favorite. Chumley, born Austin. Lee Russell wasn't just a side character on Pawn Stars. He was the comedic lifeline that turned awkward haggling moments into viral TV. Fans loved him because he was the everyman in a world of hard-nosed negotiators. The guy who made a fool of himself so viewers could laugh without feeling guilty. But behind the laughter and catchphrases, Chumley was struggling in ways that even the cameras couldn't spin into a joke. In 2016, the illusion broke. It started with a police raid on Chumley's Las Vegas home, triggered by a separate investigation into alleged sexual misconduct, which, while never resulting in related charges, opened a door to a world that fans had never seen. What police found was not the man-child clowning around the pawnshop counters, but a reality that was far messier. Officers discovered marijuana, methamphetamine, Xanax, and a collection of firearms, including pistols, rifles, and shotguns, some of which were reportedly found loaded throughout his home. The discovery painted a stark picture that clashed with Chumley's goofy TV persona. It was one thing to see him bumble around, misprice items, or get teased by Rick and Corey for not knowing what a vintage coin was worth, and another to see his mugshot in the news, paired with headlines about harmful substance charges and weapons possession. Fans who had watched him for nearly 8 years were left questioning how much of Chumley was real and how much was just a script. Chumley eventually took a plea deal, admitting to felony weapon charges while accepting probation and counseling requirements that would keep him out of prison. He avoided serious jail time, but the moment marked a turning point in his public image and in how Pawn Stars handled its beloved goofball. Rick Harrison, who had always portrayed the pawn shop as a family, found himself in a delicate position. Would keeping Chumley on the show be seen as a tacit endorsement of his behavior? Or would cutting him loose be seen as a betrayal of a friend who was clearly in trouble? The reality was more complicated than viewers may have expected. Rick chose to stand by Chumley, allowing him to return to the show after the legal dust settled. The decision wasn't just about ratings, although Chumley was undeniably a fan magnet, especially for younger viewers who appreciated his laid-back presence in a shop filled with serious business. It was also about second chances, about the messy reality that even reality TV stars are humans with struggles that don't vanish when the cameras stop rolling. When Chumley returned to Pawn Stars, The audience's response was a mix of relief and skepticism. Some viewers felt that he deserved another chance, especially given that his charges did not result in a prison sentence and that he had agreed to comply with the terms of his probation. Others felt it was irresponsible to allow him back on air without addressing the real issues that led to his legal troubles in the first place. And yet, his return was seamless on camera. Chumley was back, laughing, poking fun at himself, and engaging in the same light-hearted banter that made him famous. However, for those who had followed the case closely, it was impossible to unsee the reports, the police statements, and the court documents that detailed the reality behind the lovable persona. The blurred line between the character fans adored and the real-life struggles of Austin Lee Russell became a quiet shadow in every episode he appeared in afterward. This chapter in Pawn Stars' history was not just about Chumley's fall and return. It was a moment when fans had to reckon with the reality of reality TV, realizing that the carefully edited image of the goofy sidekick didn't capture the entirety of who he was. It highlighted how even the most light-hearted personalities on screen can be facing challenges that don't fit the narrative of the show, forcing viewers to confront the uncomfortable truth that entertainment often hides the chaos it depends on to keep going. Rick Harrison's decision to keep Chumley around despite the scandal showed a different side of leadership in the pawn shop's empire, whether it was loyalty, business calculation, or a bit of both. Rick's choice kept Chumley in the fold, letting viewers decide for themselves whether they could separate the man from his mistakes. Did it change how you saw Chumley, or did it make you root for him more, seeing him as a flawed person trying to get back on track? Let me know in the comments if you think Chumley's troubles should have ended his run on Pawn Stars, or if second chances are part of what makes these stories worth watching in the first place. In the end, Chumley's story is about the fragile balance between persona and reality, about how even the most beloved characters can find themselves in moments that threaten to overshadow the roles they play. And as we look deeper into the chaos behind Pawn Stars' success, it becomes clear that Chumley's troubles were only part of a larger story of how fame, pressure, and personal choices collide in the world of reality TV. But Chumley's situation was only one piece of the puzzle. As Rick Harrison would soon learn, the true test of his empire's stability would come from a much larger problem: family. 5. Corey Harrison. Family can be the hardest employee to fire, but even Corey crossed lines that could have wrecked the brand. On Pawn Stars, Corey Harrison was always presented as the natural heir to the empire, the straight man balancing out Chumley's chaos while taking over more of the shop's responsibilities from Rick. Fans saw him as the future of the business, the guy with the sharp eye for value and a rare sense of humor that could lighten the heaviness of an intense negotiation. But in 2014, the facade cracked in a way that forced even Rick Harrison to face how messy family business could get. It was a warm September night in Las Vegas when Corey found himself behind the wheel of his vehicle, only to be pulled over by the police for swerving and nearly hitting a parked car. According to the police report, Corey admitted he had been drinking, and field sobriety tests did not go in his favor. He was taken into custody for driving under the influence, a charge that threatened not only his reputation, but the carefully curated image of the Harrison family's brand. For a show that made its living off being the hard-nosed, clean-cut experts on all things rare and valuable, seeing one of its stars in a mugshot felt like watching a pristine collectible dropped and chipped on live TV. Corey later claimed the breathalyzer was inaccurate, and the case was ultimately dismissed. However, the incident left a mark that many viewers could not easily forget. It also exposed the double standard operating within the walls of the gold and silver pawn shop. The same walls where everyday employees found themselves on thin ice for much less. Corey had the protection of blood ties, and that gave him a safety net that others simply did not have. Because when employees like Chumley faced legal trouble, there were public statements, apologies, and the risk of removal from the show hovering over every episode. For Corey, the family shield meant he could step back into the shop with minimal interruption, and his missteps were handled quietly compared to the spectacle that surrounded others. Rick Harrison, as both father and boss, had to make a choice that many family businesses face at some point. Do you discipline your own child the same way you would any other employee? Or do you let family mistakes pass? Because, well, it is family. The situation revealed a truth often hidden behind the bright lights of reality TV. Family loyalty can cloud business decisions, even in an industry built on cold, hard valuations. Rick had always been clear that the pawn business was about numbers, about value, about ensuring the shop stayed profitable. But when Corey stumbled, the value system shifted, making room for forgiveness that may not have been available to non-family employees. And yet, for many viewers, Corey's troubles made him more relatable. Who hasn't made mistakes, especially in their 20s and 30s, thinking they were invincible until reality came knocking? For fans, seeing Corey struggle and return to the counter, trying to prove himself again, added a layer of humanity to a show that could sometimes feel like a machine of constant deals and price tags. But it also forced a question. Would you treat your own family differently if they messed up on the job? Would you risk the stability of your business to protect them? Or would you draw the line, no matter who they were? Rick Harrison's handling of Corey's situation offers no easy answers. Only the reality that family businesses operate under a different set of rules. And those rules are often shaped by love, loyalty, and the fear of losing what matters most. As Corey continued on the show, his dynamic with Rick became part of the brand's identity. A father and son navigating business together, learning from each other while occasionally butting heads. The DUI was a moment that could have fractured that narrative, but it instead became another layer in their complicated story, reminding viewers that the Harrison family's bond was not just a storyline, but something real, for better or worse. However, Corey's situation was just one example of how Rick Harrison managed personal loyalty inside a business that demanded constant performance and precision. Before we end, there's one more. Off camera. Hidden. Bigger than any meltdown or family fight. The worst employee saga wasn't even in the shop. It was behind the cameras, where the real money and the real damage happened. David Van Taylor exposes Pawn Stars. That systemic crisis was a devastating wage theft scandal that revealed Rick Harrison's empire was built on the systematic exploitation of his production staff, costing workers a staggering $40 million in stolen wages. This might surprise you, but the Pawn Stars story isn't just about family drama, goofy sidekicks, or million-dollar fines walking through the door. Behind the carefully staged negotiations and banter that made the gold and silver pawn shop a global name was a hidden cost paid by the people who filmed every moment. In 2013, the Writers Guild of America East ran a survey that cracked open the reality TV industry's ugly secret, and Pawn Stars was right there in the middle of it. Workers who helped create Pawn Stars found themselves losing around $30,000 each year because they were denied overtime and legally mandated breaks. Imagine pouring your energy into a show that became a household name, only to discover you were being shorted nearly $600 a week, every week, for simply doing your job. And it wasn't like these were cushy 40-hour weeks either. Producer David Van Taylor stepped up to testify about the brutal conditions. He described 100-hour work weeks that came without a single extra dollar. Weeks so long, they blurred into months of relentless grind. Workers at Pawn Stars found themselves making around $4,000 less each week than comparable scripted TV positions, even though their contributions were essential to making Rick and the shop look like reality TV gold. The scandal grew to the point that by 2015, employees at Left Field Entertainment, the company behind Pawn Stars, began a unionization effort to protect themselves and demand fair treatment. It was a quiet rebellion inside an industry that often treated labor as disposable, with reality TV producers expected to pay their dues through endless hours and little appreciation, while networks and on-screen talent took in the profits. The wage theft allegations cut deeper when you consider how the Pawn Stars brand prided itself on valuing every dollar, every collectible, every scrap of gold and silver that came across the counter. Rick Harrison built a business around the idea that value should be respected, but the people capturing every deal, editing every clip, and ensuring viewers were glued to the screen were treated as if their time had no value at all. And while on screen we saw Rick fighting for the best price, behind the scenes his brand was under fire for an entirely different kind of negotiation, one where the workers didn't even get a seat at the table. It reveals the darker underbelly of reality TV, where the faces you know and trust are only one part of a machine fueled by unseen workers who too often pay the price for someone else's success. Have you ever experienced workplace exploitation or watched your hard work benefit someone else while you were left with scraps? Drop your thoughts below. Let's discuss in comments.